Welcome to the Nostalchica, where I serve spooky and nostalgic tea every week. We all know what I'm talking about today, so let's not waste any time, so let's get right into it. In this new series, we have Evan Peters playing Dahmer. I will say he does deliver a bone-chilling performance. By that I mean there were times in the series where you almost forget that it's a series, and yes, it's based on true events, but Evan's portrayal, the mannerisms, the way he looks, moves, talks, all of that, it's just so close to whatever you want to call it, the original, that it leaves you feeling very uncomfortable. So he did really well. I will say for me, a standout performance was by Niecy Nash. She used to be on this show, I think it was something where, back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, it was like not like Hoarders, but it was where she would go to people's homes and make sure they were cleaned, and the whole crew would come and clean. And then by the end of the show, that person's house would be spick and span, spotless. I really like Niecy Nash. I really think she has a stellar performance in her role as Glenda. She was a totally believable character. Just like with Evan Peters, I almost forgot she's acting. I don't know if you know this, but Glenda's character in the series is actually made up of two real people in the case. One being Glenda and the other being Pamela. Glenda was Dahmer's next door neighbor, whereas Pamela, she wasn't a next door neighbor, but she would bump into him and she would also place calls and share her concerns with authorities. The real life Pamela was actually given sandwiches by Dahmer. If you did see the series, Glenda was given those same sandwiches. I'm not sure why two characters were put into one in the series, but that is something to note if you didn't know. Another character that was portrayed really closely to the original was Lionel Dahmer, Dahmer's father. He looked a lot like his father. If you look at them side by side, it's kind of hard to tell the difference, so they did well there, and his acting, his portrayal of Lionel was well done. For all my 80s people out there, you might have noticed that in the series, Lionel had a second wife who was played by none other than the Molly Ringwald, yes, former Brat Pack girl of the 80s. We're talking 16 Candles, Pretty in Pink, Breakfast Club. It was really cool to see her again on the screen. Now, for those of you who haven't seen it yet, you have to be in a certain mental space to watch it. Just to know that it's really heavy, it's disturbing, based on true events. So if at this time you're not really in that space to handle that, you don't have to watch it. I can give you the lowdown here, or you can read summaries, or maybe watch it at another time. We were watching the series, maybe not every single day, but every other day. There came a point where we both were like, you know what, why don't we take a break and watch something else more uplifting, more light? That's also something you can do, where if it's too much, maybe just take a break from it, and then when you feel like you can watch it again and go back to it. Now, I don't want to focus on that monster, rather focus on the themes that are really important in this series that we should be paying attention to, that are still happening right now, today, and focus more on the victims and their families. That includes these ridiculous memes that need to go. I've seen several online poking fun, and that is highly inappropriate and insensitive. It's very tasteless. If you're gonna watch the series, do it with respect for the families and the victims themselves. Now, this is where the controversy lies. Well, there are a couple. One of the big ones being that the victims' families have spoken out against this series due to the fact that they were not notified beforehand. It's a tough situation because yes, you're in the money-making business to make shows and series and content for people to consume, but at the same time, you're telling a story based on true events that affects real people, real things happen, real victims. So there has to be an in-between, I believe, where it's like, why don't you notify them, or donate to the victims' families? Maybe some of the profits can go to them. Hopefully, going forward, there can be more collaborative effort between both parties to see what's actually fit and what can be done respectfully. We don't need to rehash all the crimes that this monster did, but I am glad that they did shine a light on the overt racism and systemic racism that affected this case, the victims themselves and their families. For instance, now this is a spoiler, so if you don't want to know or if you haven't watched the series, this is your cue to go if you need to. One of the most mind-boggling situations in this case was what happened to 14-year-old Conrad. Dahmer took to his apartment, escaped, undressed, and harmed, and Glenda, who was actually there, saw him and called the police. And when the police came, Dahmer told them that was his adult boyfriend. Yes, you heard correctly, adult. Looking at the image here, we all know that's not an adult. But what happened? They believed Dahmer, and that poor child was taken back into Dahmer's hands. You had Glenda calling the cops, and even her relatives or friends are with her to also share that the same thing is happening, that Glenda's witnessing. They're all witnessing it together. All of them, this young boy who obviously needs help. You have all of them against Dahmer, yet authorities believe Dahmer. That is an issue. Another scene that exemplifies this is when one of the men Dahmer took home, he was able to get himself out of Dahmer's company, and he went to the police to report there's this weirdo. He tried hurting me and getting rid of me. And he sits there with an officer and is like, so you're gonna believe a white man with a record over a black man without a record? And that line, that delivery was so powerful. They did make an effort to make it known that, yes, racism had a lot to do with the negative outcomes of this case. Had they listened to Glenda and Pamela and all those trying to look out for the victims, things could have turned out differently. Now, knowing that the authorities had the opportunity to save this child, it made me want to go down a little rabbit hole to see, who are these two individuals, these two authorities who neglected this child? Well, folks, one of the authorities, John Balsarek, is actually retired now from the police force and owns a tavern in the Wisconsin area. Now, after Dahmer was captured and imprisoned, the two officers who failed to do their jobs and failed this young boy, only to be reinstated by a judge a couple years later, and as if that wasn't a slap on the face, they were each given $55,000 back pay. As if neglecting this child and failing to save him isn't bad enough, but the fact that they were fired and got their job easily, so quickly, and were paid back for it, it happened. I also found out that this John character not only rejoined the police force a couple years after being fired, but he also made it to president of the Milwaukee Police Association. So again, where's the accountability here? And that's where I want to say Netflix does a beautiful job of making sure we know that's what happened. I understand being the father of this monster is not easy. It wasn't easy. But to learn that Lionel Dahmer tried to make a profit off of his son's horrendous crimes just leaves a terrible taste in my mouth. If anything, if any profits are to be made based on this case and what this monster did, that money should be going to the victims' families and not in Lionel's pockets. Now, cinematically, one of the scenes that stood out to me was when Dahmer walks into, I believe, someone else's apartment, and he opens the door, and on the table is a Frankenstein figurine. It's just there on the table, and then Dahmer looking at it. And to me, it's like, who's the real monster here? Is it Frankenstein or Dahmer himself? And we all know the answer to that one. I also heard recently that there's a pair of Dahmer's glasses that he had in prison that are going for auction. I believe like over $100,000 or something like that, which is disgusting. The fact that people are selling this and trying to make money from it, and people actually want to have it, they want to use their money to have this item from this disgusting, I don't know what you want to call it. I don't understand it. I cannot comprehend. It should be illegal, really. I feel like there's a lot we can learn with this series and how it affects different people and how we can do things better. I also appreciate that they brought more light and attention to the systemic racism and overt racism. Well, chicos y chicas, that's it for today with your nostalgic news and spooky tea. You know where to find me aside from YouTube. If there's anything you want me to cover next week here or on Instagram, let me know in the comments below. Send me a DM. I'm happy to cover what y'all want to hear about. By the way, American Horror Stories is a new series spin-off of the original on Hulu. I've been watching that and it's good. I'm about 5-6 episodes in. Each story is different and doesn't build on the last one. So if you're that kind of a person where you want different stories each episode, then check it out. And if you want me to talk about American Horror Story, new series, or the old ones, let me know. As a little side note, if you're looking for Halloween decor, decorations, I got you. I did do 2 videos where you can find some cute stuff that doesn't break the bank. You'll find them in the links below or after I end this video. From the bottom of my spooky nostalgic heart, thank you for watching. Remember, stay safe and keep persevering. Nostalgica.